another Tuesday. Welcome to Tuesday Live. I am Omini Odan. The Deep Offshore Petroleum Sharing Contract Act is widely celebrated by Nigerians who commend President Muhammadu Buhari's political will for the amendment of the act that had been due for decades after oil prices picked up from less than $20 per barrel in the international market that would have earned the country more development gains. With the amendment, Nigeria is expected to earn an additional $1.4 billion annually as royalty from oil production. A report of the Nigeria Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, NETI, this year reveals that due to failure to review the Act, Nigeria lost between $16.3 billion and $28.61 billion that would have translated to unprecedented growth. Prospects and gains of the Deep Offshore Act tonight on Tuesday Live. What next after the Act? Answers and more after this background report put together by Mia Ogidi.
This is the oil-rich Niger Delta region of Nigeria. This aerial view tells one of how waterlogged the region is, and most of the operations in the petroleum sector are carried out in the deep waters. Records from the Department of Petroleum Resources in May 2019 state that about 13 billion barrels of crude oil reserve is in Nigerian deep waters, accounting for 850,000, representing 40.47% of the 2.1 million barrels daily oil production in Nigeria. As of December 2018, 3.2 billion barrels of crude oil had been drilled from the deep offshore. 83 oil blocks are in the deep waters, 30 already awarded, 8 in 1993, 8 in 2000, and 14 in 2015. Out of the 30, 8 are oil mining leases, that is OMLs, so 53 oil blocks still in federal government custody for now. For the Nigerian Parliament is an interesting story from the production point of view, but an uninteresting one from the financial angle.
That we need to again go into it so that we can generate a sufficient for our own nation. The power sector is one very key and important place.
In 1993, the Deep Offshore and Production Sharing Contract Act was introduced in order to attract investors to operate in the petroleum resources offshore and to de-risk activities, empowered companies to pay royalties only when the price of crude oil is above $20 per barrel and to be reviewed every 5 years. That is, between 201 to 500 depth underwater operations is 12%, 501 to 800 is 8%, 801 to 1000 is 4%, while 1000 and above is 0%. Regrettably, however, more than 3 decades, this act was not reviewed, despite the fact that oil price for long rose above $20, with Nigeria losing billions of dollars to multinational oil giants operating in Bunga, Akpo, Egina, Usan, and Agbami oil fields.
The act provided in itself the need for it to be reviewed 15 years after commencement. It's about 26 years now. This part of the Principal Act has not been exercised.
And over the years, we know that at a point in time, the price of crude oil has even hovered over $100 at a point in time. But we have not taken leverage on the advantage of that provision of the Act.
Basi Albert Akpan, a legislator representing the Akwa Ibom Northeast in the Senate, moved for the amendment of this Act on the 3rd of October 2019. And it was given accelerated hearing by colleagues and subsequently passed.
We are here to review this law in line with our mandate. If that law has said 15 years, we have to bring it up to 10 years.
The review period is increased from 5 years to 10 year. I want it to remain as 5 years.
Today, the Act is amended and signed by President Muhammadu Buhari. For the Chief of Staff to President Buhari, Abba Kyari, 1 trillion naira annually is what Nigeria stands to gain from this exercise, which will translate into better life for the common Nigerian, better schools, better infrastructure, and of course, sanitize the petroleum industry. Mia Ogidi, NTA News.
Offshore Act benefits for Nigerians. The focus of Tuesday Live tonight. Tuesday Live, as you know, is an audience participatory program. At some point, we'll come to you for input, phone calls, and other reactions. When we come to you, turn on the volume of your television set to avoid the hallback or echo. Also, you can join us via social media on our Twitter handle at Tuesday Live NTA, and we will address your tweet as much as the time will allow. That's the focus of the program tonight. I'm being joined tonight by the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs, Ajuri Ngelale. Good to have you on the program.
It's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, former minority leader, politician and businessman. Good to have you on the program.
Good evening.
And being expected tonight is Dr. Kayode Ajuli, a legal practitioner who will join us on the course of the program. Well, the tone has been set for the program, and a lot of reactions. Will it be a win-win? Will it be a win-lose? And as technical as the program is, we'll be able to bring it down to the understanding of the common man, and we'll appreciate it better at the end of the day. But quickly, let me ask Ajuri, in simple terms, can you further break down what is this Offshore Act all about?
Thank you very much. Well, this is obviously a highly technical topic, and like you said, it is important that we break it down to as many people as possible. So let me try that. First of all, let's understand where we were and what the situation was. You had a 1993 law that was the Deep Offshore and Inland Basin Production Sharing Contract Act, which essentially stipulated that once the price of oil surpasses $20 per barrel, that deep offshore revenues would be shared at a rate that would be agreed upon between the federal government and its partners, those who are engaged in deep offshore exploration. Now, as has been established by the background report, once that had been achieved, once the global oil price had surpassed that number, there was obviously a failure over decades to amend that, and as a result, obviously, we have lost tens of billions of dollars. Now, specifically, the way that this works is that initially, for several decades, from 70s onward, 60s, 70s, etc. onward, the focus was on joint ventures, where you had the federal government controlling about 60% stake generally, but with I think partnerships with Shell were prorated down to about 55%, and then the joint venture partner would now take the remainder, and that was for inland or frontier basin drilling or exploration. That is drilling that is less than 200 meters of water depth, all right? And so that was how we had essentially conducted our oil business. Now, over time, as technology advanced, international oil companies began deep water exploration, which is the deep offshore drilling that we're talking about, across the world. Now, Nigeria, having seen the opportunity, now in the 1993 contract law, worked assiduously to give very large and massive incentives to international oil companies to bring in their technology to essentially do the drilling and do the exploration, and then we can now work out how to share the profits after the oil companies had taken their portion of investment recovery. That is the monies that they spent during the exploration. After they are able to get their recovered funds, then you now have the oil profit, or the profit oil. That is now shared. But what ended up happening is that as this deep water exploration became kind of the talk of the international oil exploration industry, we began to see that pivot. But obviously, we didn't take advantage of that with the amendment. So now, in specific terms, what Mr. President has done, President Muhammadu Buhari, by signing the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act amendment, has done a few things. Number one, under the old regime, we had the rate at which we were paid royalties, we were to be paid royalties on deep offshore drilling and exploration, was calculated on the basis of water depth, right? So for example, if we now understand, as I've explained, that the frontier or inland basin is from 0 meters to 200 meters of water depth, and then from 200 meters and beyond is offshore deep water exploration, then what was happening before was that from 200 meters, right, which is deep water, to 500 meters. If you're able to explore within that range, the royalty was set at about 12%, right? 12% royalties to the federal government of Nigeria. Now, if it was at a range of about 500 meters to about 800 meters water depth, then it would now reduce to about 8% royalties due to the federal government. Then from 800 meters to 1,000 meters, it would then reduce further to about 4% royalties paid to the federal government. Then most importantly, from 1,000 meters beyond, they put the number at 0% royalties due to the federal government of Nigeria under the Pre-Amendment Act. So what that now means is when we talk about the existing deep offshore projects, when we talk about the Bonga oil field, for example, the primary one, the first one from Shell, you're looking at about approximately 1,500 meters in water depth, which means what? Under the old regime, you're paying 0 royalties to the federal government of Nigeria on the basis of that old sliding scale that's based on water depth. So what Mr. President has done with the amendment is, instead of basing the royalties due to the federal government of Nigeria on water depth, he has now based it on the oil price globally, right? So now, instead of it being based on water depth, the rate is very, very clear for everybody to see and understand and agree on in terms of the international oil companies and the federal government, which is that from $0 to $20 per barrel. If the international oil price is between $0 and $20 per barrel, then the royalty is 0% due to the federal government of Nigeria. If the global oil price is $21 to $60 per barrel, the royalty due to the federal government of Nigeria now goes up to 2.5%. Then, if the oil price goes from $61 per barrel to $100 per barrel, in that range, if that's where the global oil price is, it now goes from 2.5% to 4%, which is where we now fall, given the current oil prices. Then, from $101 per barrel to $150 per barrel, it will now go to 8%. And then if the global oil price ever goes above $150 per barrel, anything above that, it's now 10%. That is the adjusting royalty rate. There are 2 royalty rates that have been established by this Amendment Act. I need to be clear about the other one. You now have what is the flat rate, the flat royalty rate, which means this is essentially what is due to the federal government of Nigeria by the exploration partners once there is any production of not just crude oil but also condensates as well as gas deposits. Everything is covered under the amendment now. So now we have a 10% flat royalty rate that is to be paid to the federal government of Nigeria, and then the remaining royalties will be calculated on the basis of the global oil price as I've laid out. So moving forward, what that means for us, and we're going to get into the specifics of the various prospective deep offshore projects that are currently underway or will be underway, and the current projects that we can benefit from immediately, which is what Mr. President was referring to in the speech he gave during the 2020 appropriation bill presentation, when he made very clear that with the signing of this amendment, we would immediately begin to see an immediate revenue of about $500 million, scaling up to $1 billion, and then eventually by 2021, $1.5 billion a year based on the current oil price, which is also expected to rise. So I look forward to getting into more specifics, but that's essentially how it works, to set the pace for the conversation.
Okay. We always say government, people, and the legality. And I'm happy that the team tonight gives to that tripartite position. Now, let me take on Honorable Farouk. From the people's angle, what's your perspective?
Good. You see, just to break it down, the people of this country will now benefit in terms of more money. More money means more projects. I mean, this time around now, unfortunately, from 2007, when DPR sent a notice to these oil companies about the law needs to be redone in 2008, nothing happened. Nobody cared. This time around, we have in place a president and the National Assembly, of course, that have the people at heart, which means there shall be more money to accrue into the coffers of this country, which means the oil producing communities will benefit more. This time around, ensuring that the environment is kept good, in good term, also their security, their livelihood, then as the nation in general as well. The government will now, instead of being, operating budgets in deficits, probably this time around the deficit will be much, much lower than what was expected. Because now more money is going to come. We're expecting at least $1.4 to $1.8 billion in 2020. In 2021 will be about 2-point-something billion. Look, it's criminal that these monies over the years have gone somewhere. In fact, we should be, as a nation, be asking, who took this money? Who was responsible for ensuring these laws were not, put in place? Now, you can excuse President Buhari for the last 4 years because the National Assembly that was in place that time was not friendly. This time around, a National Assembly that was ready to work for the country with the government in conjunction. You could see the person who moved the motion is a member of the PDP, which means there is no politics to this. It's about Nigeria. What do we do to make this country a better place? A member of the PDP proposed the amendment. Everybody supported it. The government assented to it. And today we have a bill that everybody is happy. So I hope as a nation, as a people, we will continue to move in this way. And I call on the members of National Assembly to please also look at the PIB, the Petroleum Industry Bill, that should come, so that all these things will be in one place. The DPR, the PPPRA, all of them will come under one roof, so that this country will harness and benefit, so that probably in the next 4 or 5 years, the revenues will accrue better. Secondly, I call on the government of this country. I think it is a shame on us as Nigerians all, that 63 years when we started getting oil, that we are relying on IOCs. We rely on Shell, etc. to come and drill. If you go to Iran drill their oil themselves. Malaysia, Singapore, we also as a country should have a deliberate effort to ensure these IOCs, some of them go. Those that are not willing to go by the rules of our country should go. So that, our people can also develop capacity and so on and so forth. We have great Nigerians all over the world who can do these things. So I hope this government, this time around, will also ensure there is indigenous technology to ensure that we also produce our own oil.
But if you go into the rudiments, you hear so much about IOCs, FGN, contractors, FGN. So by implication, it therefore means that if fully implemented, the communities will benefit better than what it is now.
Absolutely. Because look, you see why the communities will benefit. In fact, that's why I told you that the PIB is very important, because in the PIB will bring in the communities directly. They will be part of all these things. Communities will direct communities, not just like state producing state. I mean, it will not be like Bayelsa or Akwa Ibom. No, it will go specific to local government communities. So this is exactly what we are saying. This is the government that has the thing. That think that, okay, fine, yes, let's do what is Nigerian and what Nigerians will benefit, so that the people in the oil producing will not think that the government is aloof, the government does not care what's happening to them. So I think kudos to Nigerians.
Okay, you've been itching to add, you want to add the voice to what he said?
Well, yeah, he made a series of very important points. Just to add to what he said, just to say that, it is absolutely true that the petroleum industry bill and all of the breakdown component parts is going to be absolutely central in maximizing the gains of the deep offshore production sharing contract act amendment, which Mr. President has just signed. Let's appreciate something very specifically. There was obviously an attempt by the 8th Assembly to put forward the PIB in the breakdown of 4 component bills. But we also know that once those bills were transmitted, there were elements of those bills that were absolutely unacceptable to, I think, most well-meaning or patriotic Nigerians. You know, you had clauses that were built in that would clearly favor the oil companies. You had clauses, for example, that essentially stipulated that after a certain period of time from the signing of that PIB bill, the PIB by Mr. President, that essentially within a certain amount of time, a certain percentage of the NNPC would have to be sold off to some private sector actor, right? And progressively so until the company is sold off. That was essentially what the 8th Assembly put forward to Mr. President to sign, which obviously Mr. President looked at and clearly could see that this was not something that was composed in the national interest, and as a result decided not to sign it. Of course, many Nigerians were not informed by some of the actors in the National Assembly at that time as to some of these very controversial clauses, and now began to question why Mr. President didn't sign it. I want to assure Nigerians this evening that the next PIB that comes out of this 9th National Assembly will be nationalistic in its thinking, it will be patriotic, and it will definitely cater to the needs of Nigerians and not the kinds of special interests that would have benefited from the continued non-amendment of, for example, the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Amendment Act. But let me just say this. Right now, we have a series of deep offshore projects, right, that we had not been capturing. You touched on it very briefly in the background report, but I think it's important to be a bit more specific now. Obviously, you have the Agbami oil field. That's approximately at peak production about 250,000 barrels per day in production. You now have the Akpo field, which is approximately 175,000 barrels per day produced by Total. You now have Bonga, obviously 200,000 produced by Shell, and you have the Erha field as well, about 140,000 being produced by ExxonMobil. Now you have all of this at approximately 850,000 barrels per day that had not been touched, right, in terms of the royalties that are due to the federal government. But what needs to be really emphasized here is that we have a huge set of prospective deep water oil projects, exploration projects that are on the table right now that have been slowed down on the basis of some of the ambiguities that existed before Mr. President took initiative to sign that Amendment Act. Obviously now with the support of the National Assembly, this is something that would have been done by probably 2015, 2016 if he had had the support of the last one. So with that, what is not really known by many Nigerians is we have several projects. You have we know of Bonga, the initial primary Bonga field by Shell, but you also have Bonga North, right? And that's the third kind of frontier of the Bonga platform, the Bonga field, which is about 100,000 additional barrels per day. You have the Bonga Southwest and Aparo, which is the kind of tier 2 of the Bonga field, that is 225,000. You put that together, that's 325,000 barrels per day. That is going to be added now to the 200,000 that's already being produced by Bonga and by Shell. On top of that, you also have the Zabazaba Eton project, right, which is being done by Agip in conjunction with Shell. That's approximately 140,000 barrels. You have the Bosi number 1 and number 2 by ExxonMobil, all of that by ExxonMobil, including the Uge oil field. 3 of those combined is about 330,000 barrels per day. All of this is to say, and I haven't even talked about in Sika field. There are so many. Yeah. You have all of these fields that are going to produce an additional 875,000 barrels per day, deep offshore, in addition to the approximately 850 that we're currently doing. If we get those into effect, if we get those FIDs signed and production starts, we're not only going to cross over from about 2.2 million barrels per day production as it is currently to about 3 million barrels per day production, but we're also going to have an additional, in monetary terms, about an additional 1.5 billion US in revenue annually to the federal government, not including the approximately 1.5 billion US dollars that is going to be added in terms of revenue from just the immediate signing of the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Amendment Act. So there's so much involved, and that is why Mr. President, in his wisdom, has been working assiduously with the 9th National Assembly to ensure that within 2020, the Senate President Ahmad Lawan has been very clear that it is an absolute priority that once this 2020 budget is signed into law, that the next focus is the PIB, because the sooner we get that done and dusted and signed into law, all of these FIDs on these deep water projects that I've mentioned and all of the additional revenues that will result will be coming in to the benefit of Nigerians and to the development of our infrastructure and across sectors.
Okay. Just as we're saying, I told you earlier, we're expecting another guest, a legal practitioner, and also a politician, Dr. Kayode Ajulo. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Thank you very much.
Well, let me just go straight to you. We have given general principles to what we are discussing, the Deep Offshore Act, benefits for Nigeria, prospects and gains. Can we look at the perspective, the legality or otherwise of this whole thing?
Well, the legality of it is...
Because we'll come to the other perspectives, the arguments for and against, the business component, the non-business component, the government component. We'll get to that. So let's look at the legality and otherwise.
Well, the legality of that production sharing contract is as simple as how it has been so explained, because I've been watching what the guests have been talking about. One thing we have to know is this. This is something that ought to have happened for some time. But the truth of the matter, as rightly put there, most of the OIC or IOC, the way you call it, seems to have the government and the practitioner at the jugular. And that's why you see, and I believe we need the time when we interrogate how this has been happening. Because for some time, Nigeria has lost so much. But to go to the basic, you see that this is the law that seems to give at one time and take at some time. That's incentives. And again, one thing Nigerians should know is that last year, we have this Attorney General of Rivers State and two others against the Nigerian government, in which the Supreme Court came with a very fundamental decision. And that is why we need to thank the Nigerian Senate and the presidency to ensure that immediately part of what this law, that is statute that we're talking about, has done is to give back to what the Supreme Court has said. And apart from that, when you look at the incentives, you see that this is the time to bring more, like what he has been saying, that we have many projects, but what we have after that. You've seen that because of the fact that we call it deep shore, many things have been going underground. Nobody seems to know what it is. And I believe that the legality, again, I need to ask is that this is more or less to give by to know that there is a new sheriff in town. Because in the history of that act, this amendment has introduced something new. That's in criminalizing some of what those practitioners have been doing. Now, there will be a fine. Now, some people will go to jail. These are the things that Nigeria need to know very well. This is something that we should applaud the presidency for. It is not business as usual. There's a new sheriff in town. Everybody need to know that. Because sometimes you ask some question. A lot of money is going around down the drain. Most of these Nigerian partners, particularly those oil companies, they don't even pay. And when they don't pay, what do? You go them to court, you start going on civil matter that will be rigmaroling. But now, you'll see some of them will be going to jail. I'm not trying to scare everybody, but these are the things that I think we need to really know very well.
But is the platform really on ground to take them around now that initially it has taken off years, but is the platform ready to take off?
I want to believe that. I want to believe with the way it was being passed. Mind you, the first reason was last month, and within a month, you see that one thing we should know in this country is that once there's political will, the law is always there. It's for you to take the government and then face it and ensure that it is done. And I want to believe with this new government, with what we have been saying, what the EFCC, what the ICPC, and all the law enforcement agency has been doing, I think they were ready to do that.
Okay. When the president presented the 2020 budget to the National Assembly, when he projected how revenue will be made, people did not understand it. But now it is very clear that he says, as it has the capacity to generate additional revenue of at least $500 million, which will aid FJ in achieving the proposed 2020 budget revenue.
Exactly. You see, if it was hidden, Now it's in the open. Now everybody knows where the money is coming from. And just a little addition. You were asking, where is the platform? The platform is the law. Okay. The law has been signed. And all the regulatory agencies that were not working before must work now, because there are sanctions for those who decide to go against the law. So I think
they may have gone rustic.
Well,
I'm thinking aloud.
No, that is true. But he said there is no sheriff in town, which is true. Which means this time around you have a president who did not show personal interest of national interest. Because look, all these, we had presidents before Buhari. Why didn't they do it? Now somebody came to do it, which means he's prepared to make sure he sanctions or he ensures that the regulatory agencies work to ensure those that go against the law are prosecuted. So I think I like this new sheriff in town.
Okay. I'll come to it. That's a very important point that should be also acknowledged. While we acknowledge the fact that this obviously has been made possible by the political will and the character of the president and, of course, the leadership of the 9th National Assembly, let's also take note of the fact that when we talk about platforms upon which we can now sanction operators operating in the nation's oil and gas space, there are very specific provisions that were just enacted with Mr. President's signature on the Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act Amendment. In specific terms, it was Section 5 that reviewed the issue of the flat royalty rate that I mentioned of 10% on all production occurring in these deep offshore platforms. It's the amendment of Section 16 that brought into effect the changes in terms of the sliding scale not being based on water depth but now being based on the global oil price. But most importantly, in relation to what we're talking about, new inputs were made. So we now have a new Section 17, which now ensured now that it actually stipulates that the Minister of Petroleum is now mandated by this act amendment that was signed into law that he must order a review by the NNPC of the terms of all production sharing contracts. So every 8 years it's being reviewed. So we cannot be in this situation again. So not only has Mr. President fixed the ills of the past, he's also now, with forward looking, is now saying we're going to ensure that that never happens again. Then he now added a Section 18. Section 18 is very, very clear. It lays out in very clear terms what the punishment, what the penalties will be for any operator in the sector who violates any provision of the Act. And I'm not just talking about the amended pieces either. I'm talking about the entire Deep Offshore Production Sharing Contract Act. Now, what are those penalties? One of them, there are actually two major ones. One of them is that anybody who violates any of the provisions would be forced to pay a minimum fine, which means obviously being the minimum, it can escalate much higher, minimum fine of 500 million naira. 500 million naira. That is with a potential penalty, depending on the offense, of a minimum of 5 years imprisonment for any sectoral stakeholder. So when you know that that is the new minimum threshold for penalties that are going to be imposed on individuals operating in the space, and you know that it can be much worse than that depending on what the infraction is, you will now know that Mr. President, in conjunction with the National Assembly, clearly, very meticulously thought out and composed this amendment that was signed into effect.
Well, let me go to Ajulo. What I'm concerned is two prongs now. Yes, how it will check corruption, but I still feel it is imaginary. How we feel it too. Some are feeling that in the perspective of ease of doing business, how will it flow?
Well, let me start with the first one. How it will check corruption is so clear. That's why I said we need to know the body language, the way the law is even being passed. That's why I mentioned that within a month, I believe this is one of the first wonder, and that is why we need to salute the courage of the leadership of the Senate to take it by the book. Because immediately I saw the first reading, most of what I must confirm, most of what we are thinking is that in the next 2 years, but you can see the way the political will to ensure that it is done. And I believe if anybody is in doubt of what the Nigerian government is going to do, particularly in enforcing that, then the person, you need to have a rethink to see the way. And you can see the way that it takes the president so much that even this bill has to be taken to where is it in the UK to endorse it. I know many people may raise the issue of legality, but I quickly remind them that we are living witness to head of state signing treaties virtually anywhere. So there's no issue about that. Just for you to know. Now, it's
not before you take the second issue,
yes,
don't be annoyed.
Yeah.
Our first caller tonight is calling in from Jos, Alex. Hello, Alex. You're on to Tuesday Live. Before we lose it all, please. Hello, Alex. You're on.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Very effective solutions.
Go ahead. We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, very effective submissions from the studio here. But my biggest problem is the issue of corruption. Hello? Can you hear me?
Alex, go ahead. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, the biggest problem is the issue of corruption. It doesn't appear as if this government really has the willpower to fight corruption.
Okay, well, he has made a valid point there, and just related to the question I asked. Okay.
Like what I'm saying.
He says corruption.
Yeah, sure. You need to know the willpower. The willpower can be deduced from the way and manner this bill backs to law. And that's why I'm making that it takes the president. But I think, and I'm very sure the president the front line issue for making sure that even despite being away, this is immediately endorsed. And apart from that, like the question you asked again, what about ease of doing business? Like I said, this law, it's in threefold. First is to ensure that get some incentives available for those that want to do business with Nigeria, in the sense that making it easier. That's why you can see that it's fluctuating before it's so fixated. And that is one of the reasons why we are yet to really get it right, because people always make some excuses, trying to say we've not been able to do this because oil has gone up, oil has gone down. But whatsoever may happen, there's provision for that. And that's why you can find that it is another way to draw more of the investors to come to Nigeria to do business with Nigeria. Then I'm not minding the fact that this thing again, there is a provision to ensure that the revenue of the country is at least is raised to some point, so that we can be able to take care of most of what most Nigeria are asking for. For example, you can see the workers talking about salaries and co. It must somewhere the money will come from. And finally, that's when the issue of the sanctioning. So as it is a three prongs issues, and this is well prepared. And I want to believe that only somebody who is not serious that will have committed so much to ensure to get the fruit of their labor in this law, to say that the government will go to sleep. It is a new dawn. And let me repeat again.
Okay. We think that the government will go to sleep. It is a new dawn. You remember when Mr. President hinged the message on corruption in 2015? He said, if you don't fight corruption, it will kill you. Yes. Now, these persons within this space are very powerful people. The president has the will with the good legislative support. The act has been passed. Implementation remains a problem. Now, if these same persons, as rich as they are, like Alex who called from just said, corruption is a concern. Do you think if the appropriate laws are not firmed up, it will work with the monies these guys have to buy their way through?
Well, first of all, as a people, we need to be patriotic. Fighting corruption is not just the business of Mr. President or EFCC. And all in this country, we are living witnesses that there is a company that was sanctioned billions of naira in this country, mobile communication company, one of companies that are into mobile services. They were sanctioned, they were fined, and they are paying. In fact, they have finished paying, which means international companies working in this country know that there is a government in place that shall not condone act of corruption. But of course, corruption is still there. It's not killed yet. But then, you cannot discuss corruption on the table anymore in this country. Yes, you can discuss it on the table. If you are caught this time around, no escape. And with the 500 million minimum fees, a minimum like sanction. If it's 500 million minimum, which means you could go to 10 billion. So if you commit an offense, then you know you could be slammed with a fine of 500 million. You had better not do that. And I'm telling you, this country now, this government is willing to shut down any company that decides to contravene the laws of this land. More so, the livelihood of us is this oil. So any company that comes to deviate from our laws, I'm telling you, the whole people of this country will back the government to ensure the company goes. That's why I said, look, then we as a people also have to start looking inwards. Why can't we start doing these things? No matter how crude, let's start doing these things together. Because look, when it started, the drilling, they are not drilling vertically then in 1993. These days, they can decide to drill here while the oil is probably 100 miles away, this time around. So that is why the government decided to come with this bill, act it quickly also because of the pressure. Of course, we are not an island as a nation. There are countries, leaders who lobbied Mr. President, who tried to make sure we don't sign this law. But then the difference between truth and reality, this is our country. Mr. President works for Nigeria. The interest of Nigeria is to sign this law. So that's why he said, quickly bring it. I was taken, and he signed it, and today we have the law. So I think...
Let's take this call from Maiduguri. Abubakar is calling in from Maiduguri. Hello, Abubakar. You're on to Tuesday Live tonight.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening. We can hear you. Go ahead.
I'm calling from Maiduguri.
Go ahead.
Yes, first of all, I want to commend the legislators for their efforts and also the president that signed the bill in order to benefit Nigerians. Actually, our problem in Nigeria, all the good initiatives will be initiated. But the problem is to implement it. Let's take an example on this Mambila hydropower plant. I think this would benefit even the neighboring countries, not Nigeria. But actually, a whole minister come out and say nothing was done there. Upon all good advocations and whatever that the Mambila hydro plant will be commissioned by the year 2020. So, our problem is the corruption. Whatever comes as a good initiative in Nigeria will be implemented, will be signed into law, and will be commenced. But in order to complete it is the problem. So let this good initiative to be implemented, please, because it will benefit the nation. It's not Mr. President, as the speaker said, he is single-handedly initiated it. Many presidents came
Thank you, Abubakar. Thank you, Abubakar.
I needed to, you spoke about ease of doing business.
Yes. Yeah.
In fact, this particular bill that was signed is probably one of the best laws that brings ease about doing business in this country. It's just like it's done elsewhere, best practices. So these IOCs that are coming from Western Europe or Asia, where in their countries there are certain things you cannot do and go scot-free.
Sure.
Now we have imported those kind of things. We said, okay, we also, as a country, this is what we need to be done. And it's going to be done. Your investment will be protected. Nobody in this country will tamper with your investment, but you also shall not go against the laws of land. his way of doing business. So, but of course, corruption, that is true. It's a major problem in this country. But as I said, we as a people need to be patriotic. If all the time we say people, government, it is not only government. As a people, Abubakar that called,
yes,
what is he doing to ensure there is no corruption in Maiduguri market? What is he doing to ensure he does not aid and abet corruption? So as a people, we need to start, making sure we are not corrupt, we abhor it, we make sure that we detest it, we expose it, so that if we start from ourselves, then it can spread. And as I said, this time around, nobody in this country discusses corruption on the table. Okay. Back in the days, you could. Yeah. Now, it's impossible.
Okay, I'll come to Ajuri. Let me take on Ajulo. Now, my worry basically is we have heard the callers hinge on corruption, implementation. I'll take that to Ajuri. But quickly, if we have sanctions for international companies and we don't have sanctions for Nigerians who want to aid them cut corners, will it work? Because you definitely will have Nigerians who want to benefit and want to aid them cut corners.
I want to believe that the law is so clear when it comes to that. It talks about the violation of the provision of that law. Any violation whatsoever. Either may be the IOC, it may be the Nigerian collaborators, it may even be international collaborator. What matters most is that once you are found wanting or violating any of the provisions of that act, then you'll be dealt with. And again, let me quickly shift this one. You know, when we talk of corruption, I believe that there are some places, there are some areas and categories where corruption may fester. But the one thing again we should know is that when we talk of oil issues, this is something that affects everybody. People, Nigerians have been talking of issue of removal of subsidy and co. I believe apart from even asking our law enforcement agencies to see to this issue of corruption, Supreme Court has already raised that one in Adefarati. In the case of Adefarati, that when it comes to issue of such corruption, to fight it, not only the government, individuals, people at home, and that is why I'm so eager to even join in this discussion today, because this is something that affects the whole Nigerians. One, we are aware, and they are conscious of their right and what Nigerians tend to lose in getting it wrong. I believe all Nigerians need to sit off. When we talk of community policing, it is not only when you get Nigerian police to be following them to do this PPRC community and co. To even, I believe, some civil society communities where this oil production is taking place, they need to put more interest to what it is. And if everybody we come together and we come with one voice and with one purpose, of course corruption, particularly when it comes to that, will be the things of the past. We all know what always happened with this issue of our service provider, the communication sector. You can see the way all Nigeria will go out. Let us do that. I believe the same way. That is the way this IOC should be treated if they try to do anything wrong. And I believe gradually we will get to where we are.
Do you think some enlightenment or to conscientize the minds and brains of, reorientate the minds and brains of the people of the Niger Delta is important here?
It's very important. Not only people of Niger Delta. This somebody come from Maiduguri.
But they are right in there.
Yes, certainly. But I want to say that by the time we look at only Niger Delta, then we'll be deceiving ourselves. All over. And particularly, when it comes to oil business, internationally, somebody may even be in Paris, somebody may be in London, and to be monitoring what is happening. It's so easy, because it is the same thing. So I believe Nigerians need to be conscientized. All of them. Then by the time you realize, we will all go out, and when it comes to this corruption, because whatsoever we lose, it will turn around and come back and affect us.
Well, the focus once again tonight is Deep Offshore Act benefits and prospects for Nigerians, and the phone lines are open, and our Twitter handle is also open at Tuesday Live NTA. A couple of tweets are coming, we'll take them. But let me go to Ajuri. But before then, is that you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, yes. What I'm saying, you see, about corruption we're talking about, it's stopping everybody. Now, Nigerian Customs came out with a novelty that a lot of people are making noise about. You cannot sell petroleum products 20 kilometers from Nigerian border. We as Nigeria, as of today, subsidize the petroleum project of Niger, Cameroon, Benin Republic, and Chad. If Nigerians can be patriotic, not to take our petroleum products across, that's also part of the citizens need to act to ensure that, look, don't do this against your country. Don't hurt your economy. So if you do that, government is trying to tell you don't do it. You do it, and you come to say, well, corruption, while you also partake in those kind of things. So some measures need to be taken drastically. No petroleum products should be sold at 20. You close the borders, no rice should come in. Some of these things are like drastic, crude, but so be it. If it works, it works.
To the point you made, Omini,
yes.
Let me just say, yes, I'm from the Niger Delta, particularly from Ogoniland in River State. So, obviously the idea that Niger Delta people are to be focused in terms of reorientation is something that I would not agree with. And now, does that now mean that there are not things that we are absolutely upset about as a people? Look, I'm from River State. River State should be like Dubai at this point. If we had been doing what we're supposed to do since 1999, we've had the revenues. We're watching Lagos develop, and look at where we are. So Niger Delta people are not necessarily happy, but the reality on ground is that when you talk about the large-scale corruption, we're talking about the IOCs, you're really looking at what happens in air-conditioned offices in Abuja over the last 20 years. You're looking at what has happened between deals that were struck with various leaderships of the various assemblies and these IOCs. Now, in specific terms, when we talk about corruption, let us be very, very clear about the fact that there were several attempts made by this President Muhammadu Buhari, to put forward legislation in the 8th Assembly that would have taken us much farther than we have since gone if they had been enacted then. You had the proceeds of crime bill that was to be put forward. You had the Special Crimes Court bill that was to be put forward. You had so many bills along that line that were supposed to be put forward, and they were quashed under the guise of the interests of some people, Now, Mr. President was very clear just today, in fact, when he was honoring some Nigerians who had done the right thing in the discharge of their civic and professional duties. He made it very clear in his remarks that this is the time for us to muster the political will within the judiciary and the National Assembly to ensure that that Special Crimes Court bill is passed so that Mr. President can append his signature so that we can have a court that is dedicated to corruption cases and we don't have the kinds of bureaucratic slowdown that we've had now for decades. So Mr. President is very clear on the roadmap, on the way forward, and even with that, even with all of the attempts at stifling Mr. President's anti-corruption war within the previous assembly, we still had on record from 2009 to 2019, what did you have? 1.28 trillion naira that was recovered in cash, in naira in particular, not including dollars, euros, and properties and all of that. 1.28 trillion in 10 years. Now, the first 6 years, that's 2009 to 2015, what was recovered? Less than 300 billion out of 1.28 trillion. In just the last 4 years alone, under this president, we have seen the recovery of approximately 939 billion naira out of 1.28 trillion naira collected over the last 10 years. That tells the story of Mr. President and what he has been doing, and that tells the story of what is possible if the National Assembly, which we're now confident will happen, this 9th National Assembly, follows the leadership of the president and ensures that these important bills get signed into law so that Nigerians can finally get the justice that they have so craved from those who have defrauded us in the past.
Before we take the next point, I'll still be on you. Let's take this caller, Augustine. Augustine is calling from Port Harcourt. Hello, Augustine. Well, we dropped the call. Now, Abubakar was very emphatic. Good initiative, corruption, but implementation might be a challenge.
Yes, this is a valid concern, obviously, across sectors, but let's be very clear about something. When we're talking about oil and gas legislation, we've done joint ventures in the past, right? Anytime we had a joint venture, for example, with the Inland Frontier Basin exploration, we never had a situation, for example, where we were, the international oil companies were not bringing forth the funds to the federal government that were due to the federal government within the parameters of the contract. What we had, in fact, was the opposite. Obviously, with dishonest leadership over the last decades, we obviously accumulated a debt of approximately $6.7 billion owed to the IOCs in these joint venture cash calls. Mr. President, as soon as he came into office, negotiated that down to about $5.1 billion billion. And systematically every month since then, we've been making repayments. Now we're at about $1.3 billion. And then I think some point in 2021, we would have fully paid off all of the joint venture debt that was left behind. I say all of that because with this signing of this amendment, it is very clearly stipulated exactly the rate at which we are supposed to expect our royalties based on the sliding scale that is the global oil price. So we have not had a kind of a precedent in the sector where when something is very clear, black and white, the international oil companies are refusing to remit. That really hasn't been the challenge. The challenge has always been the corruption within the government colluding with the international oil companies to take advantage of gray areas. There are no more gray areas in the deep offshore. Now it's black and white. So any Nigerian that's concerned that we could be defrauded as soon as, Mr. President, because of his character, once he goes out of office, that potentially if somebody who doesn't have his character comes in, they're worried that we'll be cheated. I'm saying that based on what Mr. President has done and the kind of stopgaps that he has put ahead of time in this amendment, that Nigerians can be rest assured that moving forward, things are going to be very black and white in terms of deep offshore exploration. Now, when it comes to gas, if you look at NLNG, for example, that is a perfect example of what is possible in terms of ensuring that the private sector does their part in partnership with the government in terms of remitting funds, etc., etc. So the precedent is there. We've seen it in NLNG, and we're confident that with this amendment, we'll see the same in deep offshore.
Let's take this call from London. Oluwasegun. Hello, Oluwasegun. Hello.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm really pleased to really be part of this, and I have to say good work to everybody on the panel. With regards to this bill, I'm very confident, and I believe in a new Nigeria, and we just need more of these kind of updates, more of this information. Nigerians need to know what is going on. During credit to you and other panels, I have to give this to you guys. But we need more of these. We need more of this information. We're relying on crude oil. We're relying on oil, as you all said. All of these figures you're just mentioning, trust me, once you get to the hearings of Nigeria tomorrow in the morning, they will be surprised at what President Muhammadu Buhari is doing. We need to get these messages out there on a regular basis. We don't know the numbers. But with these kind of shows that we are seeing, we'll get to know more. People will have more trust. Corruption, yes, we are very sure of it. But there's a lot. I've been to neighboring countries and I've seen how smuggling is happening. Look at the closure of the border. Look at we're consuming 50-something million. But after the closure of the border, we're consuming less than that. Corruption is our problem. And I just met Nigeria like 2, 3, 4 days ago. People are aware that corruption is our problem, but nobody is doing anything about it. So how do we move forward? We need to educate Nigerians to the barest level, to let people know the issue of corruption. And we can move forward. People will know. People know that we need to work together. But there's some people somewhere putting people to face each other on the other side. But I just believe in the Nigeria that work. And I wish everybody the very best of luck. Thank you very much for this program. Please do more of this. Do more of this. Thank you.
Oluwasegun called in from London. And a couple of tweets have come in. Let me just read them. Then we highlight them because a lot will come in. The very first one here came in from at Ekrim. Granted that Nigerian government for years before now had goofed, can this able government of President Buhari press for the calculation of the quantum of revenue accruable to the country from the time the act would have been amended, taking into account the prevailing oil price? That's one. Sadiq Sage, what's this deep offshore means? Maybe you have to highlight that again.
Yeah, I think just very quickly to that question. May I answer that question?
No, go ahead, please.
Okay. So, first of all, the calculations have already been done. The forensic analysis has been completed by the Ministry of Justice. The Attorney General has come out in public to tell Nigerians that we have accumulated approximately $62 billion in unpaid revenues and royalties owed to the federal government of Nigeria during the non-amendment of the Production Sharing Contract Act, Deep Offshore. So that is the tune of, that's the kind of quantum of funds that we're talking about. The earlier figure that was mentioned, I think it was about $28 billion. I believe that figure was arrived at through an analysis of oil production, deep offshore production that was not at peak, number one. And number two, it was time barred by about 10 years. So you had essentially a 10-year window that was analyzed. But the analysis that was done by the Minister of Justice, the Attorney General, it goes all the way back to the inception of the act and beyond to the point where we now had the global oil price go above $20 per barrel. Now, to his question, which is very important, is how much of that can we get back? Can we get back any of that? We know that there are very serious negotiations going on between the federal government and the international oil companies as it relates to that issue. Is it likely that we're going to get every kobo, every dollar, every cent back? It's probably not, because it's not, the Amendment Act that was just signed by Mr. President is not retroactive to 1993 or to 2004 or 2008. It's based on the current reality. So the issue at hand is that the international oil companies know what they have gained from the non-amendment. We don't have to tell them. They have their own books, and we know what it is that they've gained. So when you have that collective understanding, when everybody sitting at the table knows who maybe defrauded the government of how much money, when everybody already knows that, then you now know that moving forward, when we talk about investment decisions, when we talk about further projects down the road in deep offshore, the federal government clearly is going to have some leverage to say, look, you know what you benefited from the past, so we're going to expect you to make some reasonable concessions in the interest of our people moving forward.
Well, the focus once again is Deep Offshore Act benefits and prospects for Nigerian. But before we go on break, let me quickly take these last two tweets before we go on break. Alas Kido says, we really need to work as people so that we move the nation to a higher developed country around the world and shun corruption in both public and private sectors. Kudos to the present administration in the fight against corruption. Amir says, in this case, I think government needs to emphasize more when it comes to awareness activities and transparency to the country. That is it. Well, we'll take a break and be right back. Don't go away.
Nigerians, our fearless officers and men of the Nigerian military are winning the war against Boko Haram. Today, all occupied territories have been recovered and Boko Haram has been degraded. Our affected brothers and sisters are getting their lives back. However, they are now after you and me. In our mosques, churches, schools, motor parks, markets, entertainment centers, and public gatherings. Be vigilant. Be security conscious. Report suspicious persons, objects, and movements to the police and other security agencies. The security of our nation is a duty for you and me. Nigeria unite against terrorism.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture.
The struggle for independence had been a long and tough one. Our founding fathers and compatriots sacrificed their comfort and even shed their blood. We cannot at this point in history afford to spirit away their sacrifices for immediate but temporary gain. Let us emphasize what unites and not what divides us. Working for the unity of purpose with a stronger vision for a better tomorrow. NTA, growing with the nation.
Nigeria, the only country we can train with remarkable potentials to excel. Let us believe in ourselves and change our attitude for the sake of our country and generations unborn. Let us revive our cultural values, which are our essence as a nation. Let us renew the spirit of patriotism and hope in our dear country. Do not take or give bribe. Be punctual always. No more African time. We can't expect to be global citizens and operate on African time. Join the queue. Insist that people are attended to on a first-come basis, no matter who they are or where they come from.
Nigeria, good people, great nation.
Make you report any crooked person, object or wakajube movement to police and security agent demo.
The security of our nation now work for all of us, so plus including me and you.
Nigeria, make we unite against terrorism. The Federal Minister of Information and Culture bring on this message.
Tuesday Live, a network issue-oriented innovation talk show.
Thanks for staying tuned. And once again, the focus is Deep Offshore Act benefits for government. Yes, the amendment will modify the royalty rate from 0% to 50% for the federal government in respect of offshore acreages beyond 1,000 meters in water depth. But let me ask this to our jury. People looked at it from a win-lose before. Will it give us a win-win in terms of government, people, investors?
Certainly, like that is one of the things we first mentioned. That first, by the time you check one of the, let me assume that this act is divided into three. The first one talked about incentives. That is, if you are going to partner with Nigeria, particularly as IOC, these are the incentives that will be given to you, which is very laudable. Part of it is that it's not static as it is. This is something that you know the next time you are going to have another contract. You even know when there will be new amendment to the act, which will help you to really look forward to what you gain. It is like, and apart from that, the transparency of the whole thing is so clear. It is not before that we don't even know where we're going. And you know, when it comes to oil business, prices always fluctuate. This act really has already planned for that. Then apart from that, then we talked of even increasing the revenue. In as much as Nigeria will want revenue, there are some incentives again. Like I mentioned, based on what the Supreme Court, the judgment of Supreme Court last year, in which that this thing will flow with the price of oil barrels. And finally, everybody seems to know where they're going. Nobody needs to complain about the violation of the provision because there is sanction for that. And I believe this is win-win. This is win-win if well implemented.
Well, Dr. Kayode Ajulo, legal practitioner and politician, I was signing off at this time because of our pressing list. Thanks for being on the program.
I'm very grateful.
Well, quickly back to my other two guests. Now, we are moving on to Honorable Farouk, NNPC, Ministry of Petroleum Affairs, Petroleum Resources, and other agencies I might not be able to recall here. If nothing serious is done about them, like Abubakar called him from Maiduguri, he raised the concerns of implementation. If the NNPC and the Minister of Petroleum Resources is not rejigged, will all this work?
Well, thank God, the Minister of Petroleum Resources happens to be Mr. President. So we, as Nigerians, will also hold him accountable. We'll hold him responsible in ensuring that NNPC is not NNPC of before, or DPR, or other companies that have association or associated with this bill. So I think we are home and dry. And the president, who happens to be the minister, signed this bill outside this country to show the importance. So let us give the government and the agencies the benefit of doubt. We didn't have this law before, now we have it. Let us be optimistic that, look, this time around, it shall work. Let us also pray as a people. Let us make sure it works. Let's also, thank God, the social media and so on. If it doesn't work, people will know. People will make noise. And the government is listening government. Just like what one of the callers was saying, that government need to inform. Well, to some extent, I don't agree with him. The government, Ajuri said that the Minister of Justice explained these things. The Minister of Lai Mohammed.
Even the Chief of Staff wrote
exactly, Chief of Staff. So you find out that, look, maybe you didn't see, maybe the caller didn't see, but the government is trying to people. Ajuri is here doing the same. He's part of the government. Us that are part of the government by extension are also doing that. So let us give the government the benefit of, that this thing will work. And in any case, as I said, this is a national project, a bill amendment proposed by a member of the opposition party. Everybody came around to do it, to ensure it works for a country called Nigeria. So please, the callers who think that, okay, implementation, let us be hopeful that this time around it shall be implemented. And if it is not implemented, we as a country will hold Mr. President accountable as the Minister of Petroleum Resources, who appended his signature as the President, also the person to execute, to ensure the Minister of State, the MD of NNPC, DPR, all other government agencies come to work. So let's wait and see. But
Ajuri, if this policy or this act runs the way it should go faithfully, what's your projection in terms of the look of the Niger Delta region in Nigeria? Because take it or leave it, it's about the Niger Delta by extension.
Well,
because what we see today is a contrast.
Right. Omini, I would disagree with
it's
you.
About Nigeria. It's about Nigeria. It's about Nigeria. I disagree. It's not about Niger Delta.
I'm coming. I would disagree with that proposition, as my friend Honorable Farouk does as well.
Can I say why I said so? When leadership of the Niger Delta region, natural rulers, visited Mr. President, he raised concerns that could not be proven by the people. He was very, very correct in terms of how much government has spent to NDDC and other agencies. And he said he expected that the Niger Delta region should be a lot better than what it is.
My brother, if I begin to go into the way I feel about my state, about the Niger Delta, this program would take a different dimension.
That's where I'm coming from.
Let's be very clear about the issues. Yes, has there been so much gross impropriety on the part of leaders in the Niger Delta region, across states, even within the NDDC, state governments, local governments? We all know that that's the truth. That is just in fact, you cannot overlook the reality, because it's always staring you in the face if you're from the place. But when we're talking about this amendment, what we're really talking about is the fact that you have revenue that was accruable not just to the Niger Delta states, but to the Federation, that was not being sent to the Federation. Obviously, it was being swallowed up by the IOCs. So this is something that would have been shared across all states, across all tiers, and all of that. So acknowledging that, it becomes a Nigerian issue. Now, obviously, there's the 13% derivation and all of that, and we know that that's where maybe the Niger Delta aspect of the whole thing comes in, and that's a legitimate point. But the reality is, if with this Amendment Act, I don't look at it as a kind of win-loss proposition. I don't see that. Nobody has really been able to identify for me, and I've thoroughly studied this document, this amendment. Nobody has shown me where the potential loophole is for any stakeholder within the process, given the kind of meticulous nature with which it was composed and the clear penalties that are laid out for those that are involved. I don't really see that loophole. I think it's very black and white. I think what it has done is it has established a level of predictability for incoming investors in the oil and gas sector that was not previously there. Barrister Ajulo touched on it when he said that when you look at the sliding scale of the global oil price, that is a scale on which time has no effect, because there will always be fluctuations. And if it's based on that and not water depth, then you're now going to have something that's very, very sustainable. So anybody coming in, making FIDs, final investment decisions, on some of these deep offshore projects, some of which I've named, that can potentially double our deep offshore capacity over the next few years, they now have a very predictable template upon which they can make those investment decisions. So I think ultimately it's going to be a win-win. We're going to have more revenue. We're going to have reduced corruption within the oil and gas sector. The IOCs are going to know exactly what is accruable to them. They're going to make further investments so that they can have more revenues. But there is ultimately a component which cannot be overlooked in this conversation, which is the passage and ultimately the assent of Mr. President to a petroleum industry reform bill. And Mr. President's committed, as I've said, the Ninth National Assembly is committed, the leadership has expressed that, but those are going to be the pieces of legislation that are going to inform how host communities are now impacted in terms of the benefits derivable to them from the crude oil production, deep offshore and inland. So these are some of the factors that need to be put to bed before some of these IOCs are going to be able to take the finite FIDs on some of these projects that are very important to the federal government of Nigeria. But there's no doubt in my mind that with the Senate President, Ahmad Lawan, coming out and telling Nigerians openly for everybody to hear that within the year 2020, I think by December 2020, the goal is the end of next year, that we should have the PIB finally on the table of Mr. President, and finally Mr. President is going to see a document that is patriotic, that is going to benefit Nigerians and not the oil companies and not some fat cat politicians. He'll sign that document and then we can move forward with some of these FIDs on some of these deep offshore projects that have been withheld now for up to a decade.
Well, let's react to some tweets that have been sent to our Twitter handle. And once again, our Twitter handle is @TuesdayLiveNTA. The phone lines are still open. You can join the conversation. Quickly from Saleh Al-Zaman 20. I think this law should be reviewed every year because technology moves very fast. I believe every Nigerian should have this information. It's like we have oil, but we are not beneficial of it. Thanks. Eruja, you react to them? Yeah. Let me quickly take all, so we'll react to them.
Please.
Or you want to take some notes?
Well, no, it's just that particular question. I'll respond when you're ready.
Just for out of time. Yeah. Eruja says, regards to the panelists for the wonderful, insightful analysis of the benefits of the Deep Offshore Act. Nigerians need to be sensitized more on benefits and what it entails. H.M. Mansawa, corruption as a word or term is our problem. Now that we have a willing government to fight it, the hope for a greater Nigeria has been rekindled. Bala Aladi, I have no doubt in this administration, but my worries is after Buhari, what next? Because if not for the coming of Buhari, people see corruption as blessing. Now, Tunde Bell, I'm surprised our private media didn't report this commendable gesture. It takes a strong political will to get this done. God bless Buhari. Kudos to you, Ajuri Ngelale. That's you. Now, Dalhatu Yunusa, great input from the panelists tonight. Great job bringing them on to at NT Tuesday Live NTA. Always a pleasure listening to Ajuri reel out this administration's achievements as if he was speed reading. I hope the government will do more to sensitize those in the rural areas as well. Okay. Well, I leave this open to all of us.
Yes, let me just thank our brothers and sisters who sent in the comments. Very much appreciate that. First of all, the first question was about the issue of why it is that the PSC would not be reviewed on a yearly basis, as opposed to Section 17, which stipulates that the Minister of Petroleum Resources would review it by the NNPC, order a review by NNPC every 8 years. The reason for that is this. Anybody who's investing $10 billion, $10 billion. In the case of Zaba Zaba, we're talking about a $13.5 billion.
Sorry, can I just take this call? I've been putting on hold Mike.
May I just finish
this?
Yes,
it's already on call.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Mike is calling in from Boko, Benue State. Hello, Mike.
Hello?
Hello, Mike. You're on to Tuesday Live tonight.
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. Yeah. Hello. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for the briefing.
We can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I can hear you. Good evening, everybody. Yes, I specifically want to thank the special assistant to the president. Yes, his explanation is very, very clear, and yes, his explanation is very, very clear, and I understand everything from him specifically. I like the way he talks. I think he's a big plus to this very administration. His clarity, I think more Nigerians need to hear from you specifically about the president. Yes. And honestly, I am asking if there is a link to your office I can communicate to the rest. Like in Benue State, information is very important. Like the London guy that called, he emphasized on information communication. Most people here don't know about these things, these important things happening to this great nation. And I don't know if there is a straight link to the office of the special assistant. I can get information or more clarity anytime I need to talk to one or two persons about what is happening in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. That was Mike calling from Boko. Okay,
yeah,
let's react.
okay. So let me just try and start again by responding immediately to my friend Mike from Boko. First of all, thank you, Mike. I'm humbled by your comments. Let me just say that the link to me is very straightforward, and it's open to every Nigerian, irrespective of party affiliation or anything like that. It's on Twitter. It's at Ajuri Ngelale, one word, Ajuringelale, at Ajuri Ngelale. I often do Q&A sessions with anybody at any time. Ask me questions. If you don't get a response the first time, try again. I will do my very best to respond to everybody who sends me a question concerning any activity, program, or policy of President Muhammadu Buhari's administration. The other issue was about why it's not reviewed annually as opposed to the 8 years that's part of this amendment. When you're investing, like I said, Zaba, right? We're looking at an investment of approximately $13.5 billion in a deep offshore oil block. When you're investing that scale of money, or even half of that, even if it's $3 billion, for example, in some of these other deep offshore projects, you're talking about the need for predictability. If an IOC is bringing that kind of money to the table and you're telling them that you're going to be revising the contract terms every year, well, it'd be highly unlikely that they're going to bring that money forward and that technology that's required to access and explore and produce and store and all of that and offload and all of that. So that's the reality, and that's not just in Nigeria, by the way. Global best practice stipulates that you're looking at a span of between 5 to 10 years when we talk about contract renewals and contract reviews. So everything about this Amendment Act, I'm not just saying this because I speak for the President, I'm saying this because it's the truth, is in line and in total conformity with global best practices, and it's an amendment that I think all Nigerians should be proud of. I think to the point of my other friend who asked why it is that this Amendment Act is not getting the publicity, is not getting the exposure in traditional media, well, it's a concern we have with media. With private media in particular.
Private media, yeah.
This is a concern that we have discussed previously, and this goes across the board, not just with the oil and gas sector. The reality of today's Nigerian mediascape is that if you're a private media practitioner or owner or whatever the case may be, the chances are that there's going to be some sort of political sponsorship or affiliation which is going to influence editorial processes within some of those institutions. What that now means is, in the context of this deep offshore production sharing contract amendment, what did we hear on newspapers, on television sets? We heard, the Chief of Staff, Malam Abba Kyari, traveled to London. Oh, there's government waste. Why did he have to travel to London? Meanwhile, the real story was that if you, just for example now, let's just say that the amendment, the moment it comes into effect, let's say the amendment doesn't save the country $500 million, which it does. Let's say it actually saves the country only $100 million, just to be very conservative, right? Take $100 million, divide that by 12 months. All right, you're going to get approximately, $8 million thereabout, right? You divide $8 million by 30 days. What do you get? Hundreds of thousands of dollars every single day. Yeah. And our media was talking about a flight ticket of a few $1,000s for the Chief of Staff to deliver this important Amendment Act to the President to sign, when in fact, every single day, you're looking at a quantum of over $100,000 that's being saved. So that's how unserious the media coverage of this issue has been, and it's up to us now to ensure that we hold our media practitioners accountable with our viewership. Because if we continue to promote or support false narratives that are based on things that are not factual, that cannot be verified, and these sensational narratives, we're not going to move forward as a country. So I think Nigerians, not just when Ajuri is speaking, not just when the president is speaking, not just when somebody from another party is speaking, should always fact check. I always tell people, fact check me, fact check anybody you hear, because ultimately that's how you're going to get the truth when you're hearing somebody speak about any issue.
Well, you see, in politics, also in life of a government, you cannot also blame other people who feel nothing is done. There are some that are in opposition. Their duty is to castigate government. Their duty is to see nothing good in government, which is also given. They are all Nigerians. But then the fact of the matter is that the people of this country know whether what is happening is good or bad. And holding other private companies accountable, I think it's a good thing. Yeah. Because look, if a media company will come out with lies, with distortion, with anything that will be un-Nigerian, we should test it. People should come out to say, look, that media house is not good. If NTA decides to go anti-people, people should say, look, you cannot use our money, public funds, and tell lies, even if the government does anything. You know, that kind of thing. So I think, yes, the government is doing as much as possible to disseminate information. But then who gets to hear the information? Maybe the government, yes, should continue to do more also to ensure that, right to the remotest village in this country, to probably translate this law, because it is very, very important. It's our livelihood, oil. Okay, so let all Nigerians know that now we have a law that stipulates A, B, C in local languages, so that people will understand that, look, there's a law now that will bring more money. And I agree with you when you spoke about Niger Delta. To some extent, yes. Because if more money comes to Nigeria, much more money will go to Niger Delta because of 13%, because of NDDC, because of Ministry of Niger Delta, and so on and so forth. So, and also just like what he said, you find out that in this country, probably only LNG is a critical or typical example of partnership that works.
Absolutely.
Company that works, thing that works. So what this act is trying to do, look, let everything work like LNG is doing. That the government will put its share, and the share will come out, the profit at the end of the year. So if everybody understands that, look, what we have done now is to do things that from now, that the government will ensure that each IOC produces, works the way it should work. In some cases, you find out that, just like what he said about the deficit in payment from the government of Nigeria into these IOCs, it's really embarrassing and scandalous.
For decades.
You find out that governments will simply refuse to contribute their own. Like even in NDDC, you find out that the IOCs try to pay their own share, but the government does not do that until this government that came that ensured that whatever you put pen to paper, it's approved. So I think it is good. Like we as a people in this country should agree and support the government. Let's see. Let's also hold them accountable. If it doesn't work, yes, then we start making noise. And also, the person that asked about why not every year. Let me speak as a businessman now. You cannot bring your money if somebody would say it will be reviewed in 1 year or even 2 years. Even if it's $1 billion that you'll bring, before documentations are done, 1 to 2 years are gone. So you need to give gestation period in such a way that the investors will see that their money is coming out and how it's going to go in and how it's going to come out.
Okay. Usman is calling in from Benin. Hello, Usman. You're on to Tuesday Live.
Yes. Good evening, all panelists.
Good evening.
I'm enjoying the studio live. Are you hearing me?
Loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay. Yes, I there is need for more publicity to be made. Actually, you can see this border closure, even most people, the common market women, do not even understand the reason. They are even blaming the government. So the government needs to do more publicity, in the workings of the government, as a matter of fact, for the common people to know and understand too. So I commend the Tuesday Live. It's interesting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Usman. Well, so one of the tweets also raised that, and quickly, there's this one here coming from Raymond. It says, thank you at Ajuri Ngalale for your deep insight in reeling out information that is scarce. Well, quickly, let's ask this. Bottom line, this whole thing is about a new fiscal regime. Reduction in the fiscal incentives available to investors within the oil and gas industry with a view to driving up the revenue of government. Let's talk to the people. The people are very, very important here. What role should they be playing generally?
Patriotism. One. Patriotism. You see, the people need to hold the leaders accountable. People need not to be praise-singing. I agree with what they are talking about. Now I concede that the information this government is giving is not enough. I concede. So the government should, as a matter of right, Ajuri and those of you in government should ensure you come out probably weekly to inform the people of this country. People need to know. So people of this country need to ask questions. Somebody asked, what is deep offshore? I mean, this simple English, So somebody needs to explain to them, what is deep offshore? What is, contract sharing? What are these things, so that, because those in government are holding this thing in trust on our behalf. Ajuri or anybody in government is no more Nigerian than I or you or anybody that is not in government.
That's right.
They are holding this thing in trust. So those in government need and should, must come out to explain to the people. Now, Nigerians have spoken. We don't have enough information. So please, the border closure, government should come out, and like the rice millers should also support government by coming out in their droves to also speak on behalf of the government, to explain the use, why these borders are closed and what benefits is given to them, so that people need to know. People will know. Then the petroleum products that are not allowed to go out of our borders, people should also be, told exactly what's happening. Why should we as a nation be subsidizing the petroleum product in Niger that have found their own oil? If you go to Niger today, the liter of oil is about 350 naira a liter, while here it's less than that. So why should we take our own there, and then nobody is saying anything? You would blame government and so on and so forth. So I think there has to be a divide. The government must come forcefully to explain to people and also sensitize people, so that Nigerians will take this project as our project, not Mr. President's project, but collective Nigerian project.
I totally agree with him.
I'll come to you. Let me take this.
Okay, I wanted to respond to his
Great
comments.
panelists, Ajuri, please, the Deep Shore Act is exclusively for the oil industry. When are we likely to have a sister bill to take care of the mining sector, especially against the illegal expatriate miners with regards to Zamfara gold banditry?
Just a very important question. Truly, the solid minerals development should be an entire program of Tuesday Live, because there's so much to go into there, and there's a lot that Mr. President is putting forward for that sector to be transformed. And me saying whatever I will say in 1 minute will not do it justice. But let me just say to my elder brother, Honorable Farouk, that the issue of sensitization and public communication, I very much agree on the need for us to be out there on a daily basis. What I would say, which is not really, it wouldn't be known unless one is a very close watcher. But if anybody who follows me on Twitter, for example, you would see on a near daily basis, I'm either in a radio station or a television station almost every day. In fact, from I think over 70 days now in office, we've done approximately 70 or so appearances, just to give a sense of how much.
Yeah, but not just one person.
No, that's
what I'm saying.
This
You
is-
know,
so-
you're just
so
one. I mean, everybody in government should come out.
So the issue is, I think for us, is to synergize, which is what we're working on. Obviously, globally, we see practices where, you know, in some presidential offices, you'll see daily briefings that are live, where people are briefed on a day-to-day basis. I think these are things that are very applicable and very doable, even in our context. I think that there are things that can be done, and I think that there are new things that will be done. We would ask Nigerians to give us just a bit more patience. Let's get into the new year and see what the presidential communications team can put together to ensure that we more effectively carry our people along.
Okay, quickly, local content is paramount here. Yes, there's a local content
law.
Yeah, mostly that is active, I think, somewhere in the Nigeria that were established there.
Yes.
Now, if we don't make it firmer or stronger, there's a likelihood that the IOCs will still want to dominate.
No.
And dominating, and dominating will mean there's a likelihood to also lose track of monitoring and controlling them. So what should be done to boost local content?
You see, we have a whole government agency in charge of local content. There are certain contracts that you cannot do it without local content. And it's there. The law is signed, and I said there is an agency in charge of doing that. And I am telling you, because I also have little fingers in oil and gas, I know the local content, what's his name again, you know, is ensuring everything that is given out to any foreign company must involve a local company. In fact, not only in oil and gas, also in all Nigerian services, consultancy and what have you. So the local content is there, and I'm telling you, there is no BPP will not give you certificate of no objection for any contract that does not involve local content. So, so I think that is given, it's taken.
Okay.
Just to add to his point, in some a bit of specific terms, what Mr. President has done during the life of this administration is obviously signing Executive Order Number 5, which had to do with new requirements in the engineering and innovation, in the procurement of engineering and science and innovation projects across the country, which tend to be high volume, not just in oil and gas, but in healthcare, in education, in power, etc. Certain quotas within that Executive Order Number 5 have been now established to ensure that, like Honorable Farouk said, that there would be a minimum quota of Nigerians employed at all levels of these organizations. So no longer is it enough just to have Nigerians, you know, on the roads, constructing the roads in terms of the physical labor, but even at middle management and executive management now, there are clear quotas laid out for that. And then obviously Executive Order Number 3, also put into law in the life of this administration. Mr. President has ensured that there would be the establishment of local patronage monitoring units across MDAs, which would essentially ensure that across MDAs you have a basic minimum threshold of indigenous contracting, you know, being patronized by the federal government. We've seen it in more practical terms. We've seen it in textiles, where Mr. President has issued a directive to the Bureau of Public Procurement to ensure that all textile factories and mills in the country are now given exclusive priority now with all MDAs in the procurement and manufacturing of uniforms for our armed services, Army, Navy, Air Force, for public hospitals, public schools. All of that has been put in place by President Muhammadu Buhari. So clearly, local content is receiving attention, and we're only going to deepen that as we move forward, particularly following the success of what we've seen with the border closure since August.
Okay, this one coming in from Olajuwon. Deep Offshore Act is sending this tweet from the UK. This is a very wonderful topic at Tuesday Live at Ajuri in Galale, and other guests have done wonderfully well. I'm glad at M. Buhari is working to sensitize the oil and gas industry. Nigeria will be saving billions of dollars. I'm glad I joined in from UK. Issa Mohammed says, at Tuesday Live NTA, for the first time in my life, I stayed glued to my drawing board watching Tuesday Live, and Ajuri just won my heart, ready to sacrifice everything in life to meet you, Ajuri. As you.
You don't have to sacrifice anything. It's free. I'm here for you.
I need you to. I need you so we can teach out our our young ones, Nigerians, good job, thanks. So you see the concerns raised by Nigerians there. Now, let us look at it. We know we are used to one directional approach to sensitization. The reactions from the tweets, the calls, have been very, very concerned about publicity, getting Nigerians to get involved, corruption, implementation. What other strategy can we adopt to bring this thing to the doorsteps of Nigerians to understand it very well and even assist government to check loopholes?
You see, I still come back to patriotism. I'm telling you, as a people have to agree. As a people need to have confidence in our government. Just like what somebody said, what happens if Buhari leaves? Buhari cannot continue to be president for life. So we hope and pray somebody better than Buhari comes. So let's be optimistic as a people. Let us also support our government.
A man of integrity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Must succeed President
Exactly,
Buhari.
that's what we're saying. And let's not hope that Nigeria will die if Buhari leaves. Let's hope and pray that somebody that has higher integrity than Buhari. That's as a people, he's not infallible. So the way God brought Buhari, we pray God in his infinite mercy will bring another Buhari or better Buhari. But then as a people, let also agree to be a Buhari in ourselves or a better Buhari in ourselves. So if we do that, then we support the system, we support the government, we hold the government accountable, and then the government holds us accountable. So if we do that with the sensitization from government, in explaining to people in simple terms, deep offshore, what is law, what is this, what is that, because the people need to know. And when the people know, then there will be less hustles, less struggle in how we conduct ourselves.
Let's speak to the business class, business community, both local and international. Most persons, when it comes to making money, they throw caution to the wind. They throw conscience to the wind. What should they be doing to sustain this act?
Well, I think what's paramount is you have the will on the part of the private investors, which you've touched on, but then obviously you now had to have the institutional will to enforce. What I think is very promising, aside from what we've already talked about in terms of the predictability and making things very black and white, is that we are now seeing the kind of synergy between the executive branch, the legislature, and the judiciary that we have been lacking now in a consistent manner since 1999. I think in the past, particularly early on in the Fourth Republic, we may have had synergy across the tiers, but that synergy may not have been driven toward a nationalistic, maybe a patriotic agenda, so to speak. I think now everybody's direction is following the anchor point, the compass point of President Muhammadu Buhari. And I think ultimately, aside from the very important point that Honorable Farouk mentioned about patriotism, for which there is really no substitute. Either you are a patriot and you want what is best for the nation above your own selfish interests, or you're not a patriot and you want what is best for yourself above the interests of the nation. We have done decades now, military and civilian, of the other, where you have selfish people serving themselves above the interests of the nation. Now we're trying something new, and Nigerians are beginning to see the effects. They're seeing railways cropping up around the country. They're seeing roads being worked on around the country. They're seeing so many different things come up. Now, it's for us to take a collective decision that this is not going to be just about President Muhammadu Buhari, that this is about us setting a standard for our own country. To say that no longer are we going to have the situation that we've always had, where we look to the white people or we look to the Asians, the Europeans and the Americans, and we say, that is the standard we want to follow. We want to be like them. We want to be like them. No, we get rid of that colonial mindset and we say that we are going to set a standard for the world to follow. The world should be able to look at us and say, this is how it is done. These people are innovating. They're finding new ways to get things done across sectors in ways that we never envisioned. And already, my brother, if you go to the US, go to Europe, what do you see? You see Nigerians leading sectors, whether it's medical breakthroughs, whether it's business, whether it's science and technology, innovation, nuclear, physics, etc., etc. You see Nigerians at the top, even in education. So why can't we concentrate that standard-setting excellence in Nigeria? There's no reason why not. And what we're saying is that we need to adopt a new national standard of excellence for our people to follow, not just in character, but in everything you do. If you're a journalist, research, do your research, ask smart questions, interrogate the issues effectively. If you're a politician, know what it is you're talking about, so that when you're making policy that affects Nigerians in a way that will take the nation forward as opposed to backward. I think if we adopt the spirit of excellence in every corner that we find ourselves, we're going to have a situation where the white businessman or the Asian businessman, whereas yesterday he comes into the country, he says, okay, I'm dealing with corrupt officials, I'm dealing with a corrupt country, I can afford to do whatever I like. Now he says, these people are serious, so don't play with Nigerians, we have to do things the right way. Mr. President has sent that message globally already. We now have to follow in his example and ensure that we create the environment and the country that follows the model that he has now set for us moving forward.
Most often novel policies like this come up, but at some level it looks as though the political class becomes a cog in the wheel of progress. Speak to your colleagues. I'm happy you said the man that moved the motion is a PDP legislator and it was given an accelerated hearing. This is not about political divide, it's about Nigeria. And if we give it a political divide, then we're heading nowhere with it. So speak to your colleagues.
Well, to my colleagues, politicians, it's whether you are in government or out of government, there's what we call oath of office, oath of allegiance. Whether you're in government or not, you should have allegiance to your country, or you should have allegiance to your people. So, as politicians, let us try those in opposition to criticize the government, to attack the government in a civil manner, in a way that the government will correct itself. Nobody is saying that everything the government is doing is correct. There could be some mistake somewhere. So let the people in the opposition come out with noble ideas, something that will help the government, because look, this bill is not made for APC, it's for everybody in Nigeria. All laws are for everybody. And so as politicians, at one time, we were not in government. APC wasn't in government. It was PDP. And it is our government, collectively. The president is no more Nigerian than any one of us. So let us see the government in power today as our government collectively, whichever party you are affiliated to, so that give the government necessary push, attack the government in a civil way, in a correct manner, in such a way it will change. Now, those colleagues in government should do everything, more than those that are out of government, to abide by their oath of office and oath of allegiance. You must abide by that to ensure that you deliver what you have sworn to deliver, and those outside, those in the party, should make sure you follow the government and support the government to make sure they deliver in the promises, so that we will practice politics in civil manner, we will contest for election, lose gallantly, or otherwise. So if as a people we don't agree that this is our country, we look at any government in power as enemy, then we're not being patriotic. So for you to, because someday, one day you might also be in power, and when you're in power, you will need the cooperation of other people. So let us come as a people, as politicians, to see ourselves as Nigerians, one Nigeria, one people, one destiny, so that whatever the government is doing is for our collective good. If the government makes mistake, let's point it to the government, so it will correct for our collective good.
I know we have touched this aspect briefly, but let me put it this way. I traveled out sometime officially and needed to do some change of money. And at where I went, the vendor said, show me your visa before we give you money in exchange. There was no law enforcement officer there, and that happened. And one of them told me, it's not like Abuja. In Abuja, I fly from the airport straight to Zone 4, Mission Zone 4, and I can change money. So let's speak to the IOCs for them to know that it's no more business as usual, because some of them, like you said earlier, that Nigeria is one place you can just go and do anything and walk away. Is that feasible now?
Well, my brother, the message to them is very clear. I think, you know, we have to be sensitive to something. You know, in government, at any level, but particularly at the level of the federal government, you can't afford to be emotional in your decision making. You have to be pragmatic, and you have to be precise, and you have to be forward thinking. What are the implications of my current action on tomorrow, on 5 years, on 10 years from now, on 20 years from now? So the point of me saying that is that, yes, have we been shortchanged by huge amounts of money? Absolutely. Have we made that very clear to the international oil companies and to our people that that has happened? Absolutely. Does that now mean we move forward in a begrudging, antagonistic manner? That does not serve our people well. Why? Because we still require investment. That's the reality. We require investment, not just in oil and gas, but across sectors. And so we have to ensure that in as much as we have done what we can do within the judiciary and within the legislature, within the executive, to strengthen our institutions and to create the enabling legislation that removes all of the gray area and creates just black and white conditions, which we have done. Now, the next stage is saying, look, as we move forward, this is the way the game is going to be played. And it's going to be one that benefits all Nigerians, irrespective of party affiliation, ethnic group, faith, and all of that. So this is where we are. I think ultimately it comes down to that. And I think that moving forward, since the message has now been sent to the international community about the seriousness of this government, not just on the issue of oil and gas, but also in these other sectors, road construction, for example. Absolutely. We have. I'll just use Julius Berger as a case study, just for example. This is a company that's obviously linked to the German government, for example, right? When Julius Berger is dealing with a Ministry of Works of yesteryear, I'm talking of, let's just say 10 years ago, whenever the case may be, and the chief executive officer or the executive management of Julius Berger is in a room with some minister, right? And they're talking about kickbacks instead of the actual work being done. You know that there's going to be a report from that Julius Berger executive to his home government. So the international community is very much aware of what it is our officials do, even when our officials think that they're operating in secrecy. That ultimately affects the relationship between Nigeria and these other countries. So we're saying that it is because of the seriousness of President Muhammadu Buhari in terms of ensuring that some of these contractors like Julius Berger and roads and the CCECC and rail and all of that, that they're actually doing the work that they're being paid by the Nigerian government to do instead of paying kickbacks. It's as a result of that German Chancellor Angela Merkel can come down into Abuja, go into the presidential villa and strike a deal with President Muhammadu Buhari to fix the power sector across generation, transmission, and distribution. It arises from the confidence that the international community now has in the Nigerian president. And that's something that I think is reverberating across sectors. And I think ultimately it's very clear when you see how Mr. President is received and you see the kind of deals, the quality of deals that are being struck in Russia in terms of defense, in terms of solid minerals development, steel development, in terms of anti-piracy, in terms of Ajeokuta Steel is what we talked about, Saudi Arabia, the establishment of the Nigeria-Saudi Council. All of these deals point to the reality that when the Saudi Aramcos are coming into Nigeria and all of these things are happening, that people have increased confidence in the Nigerian government because of the character and disposition of President Muhammadu Buhari, and it's on us now to sustain that tempo even beyond 2023.
Let's look at enforcement. We have not gone there, but before we shut down this program, laws are made, enforced, but when it comes to maybe arrest, all that, it becomes a problem. Can we speak to the enforcement agencies?
Well,
there could be a problem too.
Well, that's true. But then it all boils down to corruption still, honestly. If the law enforcement agencies compromise, do not abide by their oath of office, or their allegiance, or their work ethics, then there could be a problem. But to borrow from my friend that left, with the emergence of Buhari as president, I don't think any law enforcement agent can compromise in arrests or in doing anything injurious to our government. Well, you could do that if you're not caught. But there are certain things that you cannot, as I said, this social media thing, there are certain things that if they are in the open, you cannot just do whatever you want. So the law enforcement agencies should please be patriotic, as their actions or inactions will help in ensuring government laws are followed, are adhered to, because they are to enforce penalties and sanctions. So if they do things correctly, which means the system will go correctly. So I call on them to please ensure that, of probity, do their work the way they should, so that we can have one country that has a system that works, not a country that system does not work.
Okay, Ajuri.
Yeah, well, I think just to finalize, when you look at the leadership of institutions, in a developing context, developing country context, we know that when institutions are weak, obviously the leaders of those institutions are overwhelmingly powerful. When the leaders of those institutions have the right mindset and they're all about service to the nation, a lot of good can be done in terms of building those institutions. The reason why I say that is because, like Honorable Farouk said, there has to be a starter to any process. There is a point of ignition before you now begin to drive the car. I think for us now, we have been ignited. It is not a coincidence that it was President Muhammadu Buhari that unveiled to the nation the extent of budget padding, for example, in the National Assembly, in the 8th Assembly. It was under this administration that Nigerians got all the details and all the facts and figures and how disgusting the whole situation was. Same thing we're seeing now in the NDDC. It's being unveiled under President Muhammadu Buhari. Same thing now even with the deep offshore issue. We didn't know that the IOCs were making away with billions of dollars until President Muhammadu Buhari came in and opened it for everybody to see. So what I'm saying is, even the judiciary, what happened very recently in the judiciary? Obviously, we had a very powerful judicial officer.
Well, I'm afraid I have to hold you there because
right. No, but my point is this. Ultimately, the leaders of institutions matter, and I think that we are now seeing the leadership of institutions in the judiciary, in the executive, and the legislature that will build those institutions to take us to where we want to go.
Thank you so much. I must say thank you so much, gentlemen. Honorable Farouk Adamu Aliyu, former minority leader, businessman and politician. It was nice to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
And Ajuri Ngalale, Senior Special Assistant to the President on Public Affairs. Thank you so much.
God bless you.
And Ajulo left us midway on the program. Well, that's it on Tuesday Live tonight. We looked at Deep Offshore Act benefits for Nigerians. We thank you for your calls. We thank you for your tweets. On behalf of all of us, thanks for watching. Bye-bye.